On this episode, I'm looking forward to talking with Gary Scott Thomas, good friend and radio talk show host. Let's get started. You've been in the business for 37 years on the radio?
7 years.
Wow.
We won't even talk about how old you are. Thanks for not bringing that up.
Can we edit that out? We're going to be talking about the new age and where everything's going here.
Okay.
You're obviously on the radio, the medium that's been hanging on for a little while, and now all of a sudden it's starting to charge back, in my opinion. So I want to talk a little bit about that. But first, before we get to that, I want to talk about just the radio station in general. It's one of the largest privately owned radio networks, radio stations.
Well, the radio station, probably the largestly owned, privately owned radio station in the country. As far as the large market, you won't find a locally owned radio station, New York or LA or Chicago. It's just not going to happen.
Wow.
It's too much money, too many conglomerates. And the only reason that we exist is because our owner, Bob Keeve, believes in local ownership of the airwaves. He's had people try to buy him out, but he just really is committed that it should be locally owned. You should have a local ownership station in every market. So,
wow,
makes us a little peculiar.
It's certainly something to be said about someone that actually has that vision, carries it through, and here you guys are. You're rated #1 right now, radio show in the Bay Area. Depending on the
age group, because you can have +5 or from 12 to 24 or from 12 to 18 but if you go into certain demographics, like we're #1 women 18-54, we're #2 or 3 men, and overall I think we bounce back and forth because ratings in this size market are constant. Whereas used to in smaller markets you'll do like 1 or 2 rating books a year. Well, now it's just constant. So it fluctuates all the time. So we're up at #1 sometimes, and we're #3 sometimes, or we're #4. We're up to #1 because my attitude is radio is like your favorite restaurant. I don't care what your favorite restaurant is. You're going to go to another restaurant every now and then. So you'll always look forward to going back to your favorite, but you're going to give Wiener Schnitzel a try.
What keeps things relevant? How do you keep that relevant? How do you stay relevant over 37 years, and what keeps your listeners coming back from a different restaurant?
Well, for me personally, the only thing that keeps me relevant is I keep me relevant. That's the only thing I can control. I can't control anything else. I can't control, your music might be better, your music might be hot. Right now at this time in history, 2013, country music is great with a bunch of young, exciting artists, and so the music can help. There's been a lot of times where the music hurts. The music is just not there. But the only thing I can control is what I do. So I keep me relevant. And how do I keep me relevant? Well, I think one of the secrets for me is I've never been afraid to be me. I'm 50 years old. I don't try to act like I'm 20. I don't, wasn't Madonna, didn't Madonna make everybody a little sad last year? Where you're going, oh, honey, come on, grab a chihuahua, move over. It's, and that's what, when you try to hang on to it, and I think my audience, which is varied in age, I think they respect the fact that I'm just me.
Right.
And I'm always going to be me, and I'm going to find things that I find interesting.
Sure.
I don't do target stuff where I said, I bet you everybody's talking about this or everybody's talking about that. I try to find stuff that I find interesting. I've been doing a bit for years, decades, called Crooks Are Stupid. And the only reason it started is because
I love that. Yeah.
I found it interesting.
Sure.
I'm like, if you sit back and look at all these things, I can't believe, when you think about it, people who've decided to go into life of crime, probably not the brightest, bulbs.
Sure.
And once you find those stories, so it was interesting to me. So my job is to find enough people who find what I find interesting. If you can find the people who, as I was saying the other day, I was telling one of the artists, Thompson Square, this. J.R.R. Tolkien didn't say, I want, hobbits, hairy feet, small. I bet you that'll go well in a test group. He wrote what he did. Really, it was an excuse to come up with this language. It really was. English lit major, sorry. But it was an excuse to do that. And he built this world because he found it interesting. And that's what made him relevant.
Yeah.
You know, here we are how many years after his death and he's still relevant. I don't think anybody would be more shocked than J.R.R. Tolkien. So that's my thing is it's up to you to stay relevant.
So you're staying relevant. You're staying relevant with one of the hardest mediums where you're not getting any feedback. You're talking to a microphone. So how are you getting feedback on what you're doing that's relevant? And maybe that's social media now. But how did you do that before? And how are you now enjoying social media in that respect?
You know, social media is a completely different animal. It's one of those things that, man, I wonder where my career would have gone if I was 22 and this was happening, because you're right. It does give you immediate access, but before then, you really didn't get the feedback. You would get the feedback from your ratings, but you would also get your feedback from your public appearances, how many people would show up, and you would get your feedback from how well your advertising worked. And I learned years ago that my job was to sell stuff, that I'm not creating art. If somebody wants to look what I'm doing and say, that's artful, that's fine, but that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get you to listen through the commercials. That's what I'm there for. You know, they sell radios the same place they sell washing machines. We're a service. We're a device. And so that was always my barometer. And it was also my barometer of what I liked. If I did something I liked, if I walked away from a show going, I like the content. I may not have liked my execution. Rarely, I'm not a perfectionist, but rarely do I ever sit back and go, nailed it. Rarely. But if I liked what I attempted, sometimes, especially back in the 80s and 90s, that had to be enough for me.
You know, it's interesting because what you're also talking about is being authentic and being the authentic you. And now with social media, there's so many people who are looking inauthentic. And it's almost like putting a microscope or a magnifying glass to a lot of personalities that are out there that are trying to overdo it. They're trying to become something maybe that they're not. And social media is raising that. Now, you're in a public forum on the radio where you're live. You're there right now. And so when you're speaking, how do you stay authentic? Because I think it really transcribes really well into all mediums. I mean, television, radio, social media. How do you stay authentic in the moment and pull that out so that you can really put that across?
You know, I think it's come through doing it for as long as I've done it. And I've always just been able to hear my voice, as esoteric as that may sound. I was always comfortable with stating my opinion, because if I don't think I'm bombastic, and I don't think I'm going to go off one way or the other. You know, as I always tell everybody, I'm not left wing or right wing. I'm pragmatist, which means I hate everybody. I think we all have some universal truths, and the people who listen to me, you know, I always sit back and say this thing, and you and I've had this discussion. You know, when you meet somebody and you know you can be friends with them, it's because you meet and you bond over that shared reality. You've met people where your reality doesn't mix with theirs, and you feel like either they're crazy or they're bizarre, and they feel the same way about you, and it's because your realities don't hit, you know? But when you have that shared reality, and my job is to just do what I do and let the people find me, you know? And the people who are going to hate me, I can't do anything about that.
Right.
And the people who are going to love me, there's going to be times you hate me, but you have to trust me, you know, that I don't do blue humor. I don't do this. I don't, you know, but there are going to be times that I say stuff that doesn't agree with you because that's your pet project or pet thing. But if you listen to me long enough, I'm going to do it to everybody. And that's my fairness doctrine. Get around, I'll take off everybody. Don't worry, I'll get you too. And so that's where I go when I say I hear my voice. I'm not afraid to say, okay, and I'm also not afraid to be swayed by somebody else's opinion. I don't feel like mine is the right one. It's the way I feel about what I know right now. Your idea or something that happens to me tomorrow may completely change that view. And I think you tend to, you know, for me, that's when you know you're on the same plane of reality. When somebody's open to listen to an argument, which, you know, people sit back and say maybe that's what we've lost in this country. But when you're able to listen to an argument and totally open yourself up to going, you know, maybe you're right, or maybe I didn't look at it that way, I think it's a really shared moment for everybody. And I try to say that on the air. I try to sit back and go, this is how I think, but I'll also entertain the fact that I am completely wrong because I've been so wrong about so many things before.
Have you had an instance on the radio where you actually came out and you said, I was listening, I heard what you said, I came back, here I'm wrong, this is what I'm going to do about it? And how do you look, because those situations are happening for everyone everywhere all the time, on every media, especially on social media now. You're looking at people who are saying things haphazardly, and that could go the opposite direction. How do you deal with a situation like that?
You know, because every now and then, I luckily haven't had a lot of those, but one stands out in my mind. I can't remember the name of the congressman, but it turned out, maybe it was Jerry Franks. Why would I remember stuff like that? That where he was basically a pedophile, preying on these young men who went to serve as aides and interns for congressmen. And I did this joke about, and I said something about the gay pedophile. And this man wrote me an email and he goes, why would you have to make it a gay pedophile? Why couldn't it be a joke about being a pedophile? And you know, and it's not really a joke. I'm not joking, but I was slamming him for that. And I thought about it and I responded to it. I'm like, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Gay had nothing to do with it. When it was pedophile, he was breaking the law. How about we focus on that? The sexuality is silly. And so, yeah, that was the time that really hit home with me. And I got on the air and I said, he was exactly right. Absolutely right. And I was wrong.
You know, that's sometimes just the best case, is just to get on and say that, get over it, move on, and just, you know, move forward. At that point, you've said your piece, and that's at that point what
excuses never work. Excuses never work. I mean, you know, that's the thing that my bosses will tell you like that. If they call me on the carpet about something, and if they say, well, you did it this blah blah blah, and I may think you're completely wrong because you misinterpreted it, but I learned a long time ago. I just sat back and go, okay, sorry I did that. See if I can fix that, and then I may come back a couple of days later and go, let me tell you why. Because you never want to talk to somebody when they're angry at you. You just don't. Just accept what they have to say. You know, if somebody wants to hit you, okay, that's different. But accept what they have to say, hear and listen to it, and think about whether you're going to, if they make a point or do they not make a point. Because if it's just anger, then you can come back later and go, now that you've had a little bit of time to cool off. Because you know how you are. If you yell at somebody, even if you think you're in the right, you always sit back and go, oh, did I take that too far? And if you come back a couple of days later and say, hey, now that we're past that, let me tell you why.
You know, that's interesting, because one of the things I've come to know about you is that you're an idiot savant, and I don't place the emphasis on idiot, by the way. You know, one of the things that you're really, really good at is remembering facts, and how you remember all these facts and listen and read and learn with everything else that you have going on to come up with the right thing at the right time. You're basically listening to what's going on and responding like that. How do you listen and respond so quickly?
You know, I blame some of it on my family, because I'll tell you the story. My wife and I were going home and going to see my family. It was one of the first times she saw them. And I said, so I need to let you know, I'm not the funniest guy in my family. She goes, really? I said, no, I'm not the funniest guy in my family. She's like, whatever. So she goes down there and we spend 4 days and we're flying back home. And I said, so I told you, right? She looks at me and she goes, I don't know if you're top 5. And I'm like, I told you, right? and so my family, you had to have that comeback. If it was 3 seconds late, then we didn't care. If you couldn't go, bang, then we didn't care. That was just the way you had to have it. If you had to think about it, then you officially lost. Whatever it was, you officially lost. But I think also that skill has been developed over time. I read the other day that people who do the same thing for a long time, you actually reshape your brain. You literally reshape the front of your brain that allows you to be very good at what you do and probably keeps you from being great at something else. It's rarely why you see a great novelist who's also a golfer who shoots under par or, you know, plays in the English Premier League soccer league at the same time. You know, you rarely see those things like that, because your brain tends to get adjusted to what you do. And I think all of the years of doing it probably has reshaped it a little bit. So that's the way it works for me. Because somebody asked me, Julie asked me one time, she goes, how you do that? How do you just, and I'm like, you know, and I remember telling you this story too. For me, it's like there's a shelf in my brain, and somebody says something, and I open the shelf, and I'm like, that line will work. And for me, it seems like it takes forever. It really does. And for everybody else, it seems like but for me, it's like, oh, you said that. Well, let's see what I got in here. Oh, well, pull my finger. Okay, do that. But that's just, I think, because that's the way my brain has been rerouted, or reshaped, or reformed, or reelected. So.
Well, it's a great trait, I'll tell you that, to get reelected.
And plus, it always helps, because as well as I do, hanging out with you and your wife, you guys are the same way. If we don't have a response like that, then it doesn't matter. My wife doesn't even try anymore. Have you ever noticed? She just giggles and takes another glass of wine.
Oh, my favorite thing is when your wife actually takes you on and gets you. So that one, there's a moment here and there.
She
I'll
does.
tell you, she's got it.
She's very good because she also knows is that she controls my access to her nudity. So I'm not going to be nearly as fast for her. Well, not in that circumstance. Hey, kids.
Well, let's talk about just some of the experiences you've had over the years and what brought you to this point. You've been interviewing, which is kind of ironic. I'm honored to be able to sit here and actually interview you, the interview king. If there is anything over the years that really kind of trained you in the interview spectrum, as you've looked through everybody, you've interviewed Garth Brooks, all these people in person. The names are endless. How do you come up with what you see as an interview that makes it quality? Besides this one, obviously.
No, this one's great. I tell you, the best piece of advice I ever got was actually from my partner, Julie, years ago. And she goes, you ask great questions, but you're so afraid of their silence that you fill the space. She goes, you're so worried that they won't come off with the right answer or come off looking good that you try to fill the space for them. She said, so ask the question and let them answer it. And if they don't know the answer, that's even better. That, because I don't ask them, the circumference of peaches or anything like that. I just ask them questions, and then you leave it up to them to answer it. Whether, and it's just stuff that I try to come up with questions that if you literally were hanging out in the backyard, drinking a bottle of Tobin James with a fire pit going, not that we've ever done that, but that you would want to know. Once you've gotten past all the fan questions, once you've gotten past what it's like to be up in front of somebody, then you can sit back and find those questions where you really find the texture of like, who do you like listening to? What was that moment when you first heard your first song on the radio? What was that really like? What did you do with the first real money you made? Because the majority of them struggle with no money, living on couches for the longest time, staying in friends' houses, so when they finally get that first big check, what you do with it? And it's interesting because, we don't think about it that way. What do you do when you're at the drugstore buying NyQuil at 10 o'clock, looking like hell because you haven't showered for 2 days, and all of a sudden, 10 girls come up to you and go, I love you. What do you do? Have you been there? What's that moment like?
Right.
And just getting past that. Where's the weirdest place you've ever been recognized? Usually it involves a bathroom. It just usually does. And letting them answer it, and you literally have to just kind of throw the question out there, see what they come up with. Even if they just sit there for a second going, let that be part of the answer.
That's interesting because they always say silence on the radio is the worst thing that can happen, dead air, right? But you're saying that some dead air is good air to have. That giving them the space to actually explore the answer and be a part of the conversation is the best thing to do.
And the flip side of that is that one of us is going to try to fill up that space. If you're at a conversation and it pauses. If I don't talk for a minute or second, for 20 seconds, you're going to jump in. And when you sit back and let them jump in, because it's really fair interview. When you let them jump in, you get interesting answers, because then they start taking that filter off, and it comes out where you just go, I asked Toby Keith, what's the best song you think you ever did? Not the most popular. What's the best song you think you ever did? He's like, oh, I don't know. Let me think. No. Hold it. Which song was that? And he's like, what? Which the one you just thought about and then brushed off? He goes, well, should have been a cowboy, but that was years ago. That's maybe not the best song I ever did. And I really liked, Big Blue Note, but now that I think about it, it's kind of silly. Awesome interview, because he was doing the filling in, because I couldn't add anything to it. It was all about him, and he asked me, he goes, what do you think it is? And I said, there's my, who's that man is the name of the song. And he's like, oh, yeah, I got a story about that. And I have a clip, I run it on the air, where he goes, I asked my bass player, I wrote that song because the guy even gets his dog. He goes, is that too corny? And the bass player goes, no, man, dude even lost his dog, man. And again, if you tried to fill the space, you don't get that answer. You let him fill the space.
So what inspires you?
Paycheck inspires me a lot. Some people say, you do it for free. No, I won't do it for free either. I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day, and he and I were, I said, I was doing this contest where I said, what's an interesting fact? Give me one interesting fact about you. Because we've all got, something that, because it's our life and we don't realize it's interesting. But when somebody goes, well, this girl's interesting fact was that she met the band The Offspring. And I went, my buddy started that band. He started that band. And he got out of it because, as he told me, I kept getting older and the girls kept getting younger, and I was only there for the girls. So he decided to become a doctor. And I'm like, you left rock and roll to become a doctor. How about that? And he goes, yeah. He goes, but man, rock and roll's not as fun as people think it is. And I'm like, well, that's always my point too, is because acting and music, it's the drudgery. It's the people who can hide the drudgery who are the best at it. Because if you've seen, how many times has Mick Jagger done Satisfaction? Literally, since 1963. And he still makes it look like he's getting a kick out of it. But it's drudgery. The thing I love about my job is, and that's what my buddy was saying about, he's in medicine, he's in surgery, because I love the fact that it's different every day. I have no idea what I'm going to find every day. Your dad and brother are doctors, you know that. That they're still proud of you.
Doctor of marketing.
But and that's the thing with me. I have no idea what's going to happen every day, because every turn of the planet is going to mean just something a little bit different than the way I do it. Yes, I may be saying, here's George Strait for the 400,000th time, but all the other stuff that goes into it is going to be just a little different. And that's what I love. And I don't know how my brain's going to work that day. Some days better than others. There may be that day I come and do that perfect show. Wow, that's cool. And then there's that day I suck beyond words. Still giving the same effort, but and that's what inspires me, is that you just don't know what you're going to find. And I love that.
You like spontaneous.
Love spontaneous. But I respect people who can, you saw that Super Bowl commercial with Paul Harvey and the farmer. And somebody asked me, they said, what'd you think about that? And I said, I'm a big Paul Harvey fan because I think he was the best reader we've ever had. And he wrote that speech, and he wrote all of his, if you're old enough to remember the Paul Harvey newscast, he wrote every word of that. But he read it so well. And there's something about people can read. Me, not so much. I can't read as well as everybody else. I can read the hell out of Green Eggs and Ham. I really can. I'm probably the best reader you will ever hear when it comes to The Cat in the Hat Comes Back. But, as being able to take text and turn it into something beautiful, I can't do that. But just making it up, yeah, I'm okay with that. Because then you get you get the freedom of doing mistakes. That's what I love about radio. If you flub, nobody goes, stop, reset that, play it again. No. It's there. We're going. Here we go.
So let's talk about social media. I'll move back over to social media a little bit. You have just under 10,000 followers on all of your social channels. You've built that, I think, just in the last couple years. And you want to talk about staying relevant and moving into a medium that's allowing you to get that kind of feedback. How have you used social media? How have you built that? And where do you see it going for you? And how are you going to tie that into your program?
You know, Facebook has been fun for me because it really does allow you to get comments almost in real time. I don't think it's real time as quick as Twitter, but because, you know, with Twitter, I can have my phone right here in front of me, and the computer I have to share with Julie. But, you know, it's going to pop up on Twitter. But it allows me to find out what people are talking about. Love finding out what you guys have for breakfast. Perfect. And it allows you to find out what's kind of in the mood of just your little area. You know, as silly as it sounds, how a cloudy, overcast day or rain is affecting the Bay Area. You'll find the mood on Facebook. 9 o'clock on Super Bowl night. You could find the mood of the Bay Area right there on Facebook. And it was fun that way. It was fun for me. It's also been really awesome, like the birth of my kids, you know, because with radio, people really do adopt you. It's very personal, you know. They don't think of news anchors that way. They don't think of people. Nobody runs up to Jessica Aguirre and says, I see you every day. Well, because we're there with you. We're there with you in the car. We're there with you when the kid's sick. We're there with you when you're naked. You know, whatever. We're there with you. And one of the things I do on the radio is, as I've said, you talk about transparency. I'm me. I'm going to talk about my wife. I'm going to talk about my kids. I'm going to talk because that's my experience. And so people get interested in that. And it was fun to be able to show the pictures of my kids when they were born. It was awesome. My littlest, had problems when he was first born. And it allowed people a way to reach out to me, which was awesome. Because you guys remember, you were part of the whole thing when we were going through it. But you remember it was so nice that people would just sit back and go, I'm thinking of you. I'm sending you good thoughts. I'm praying for you. I'm doing all of this. And it was great for those people that you don't know or just kind of barely know. Because, during you going through that time, you got your friends and your family and your close friends. So we guys were holding on to you guys to help us stay up. But it was great to get that emotional support,
a larger community,
to go through it and realize there are people out there who really don't know you but are thinking good thoughts for you.
Yeah.
How awesome is that? I mean, how awesome is that that we have this social media that does that? And with Twitter, it's really instantaneous. My thing on Twitter, and you and I have had this conversation before, I'm all about the content. I start dropping people, or when I say drop people, I stop following people when I feel like you're giving me no content. When all you're doing is trying to sell a book or a tour, or if you just retweet all the people who are praising you. What do they call those now? Selfies? I think that's what they call it, selfies. And if that's all you do, I just unfollowed a comedian this morning because that's all she did. And I'm like, you're not giving me any content. You need to tell me something that was, I love it when somebody just does something and it's funny. So I just try to throw the content out there. And it's the same attitude, and Brian could kill me because he's like, if you did it this way, you'd have 400,000 followers right now. But I like throwing the content out there and letting those people find you. And it's going, well, this guy has a sense of humor that's interesting, because if I don't want to become that boring guy. When I do tweet, I want it to be at least something that might make you smile a little bit, because I love those things when I go on Twitter and somebody says something, and there's times I literally just howl with laughter, where I'm just like, God, that's so wonderful. I wish I'd written it, but I'll sure retweet it, because it's awesome. And I think I love the fact that it's, and it's so funny talking to him about this because he proselytized to me. You need to get on Twitter. You need to get on Twitter. And I've become a huge fan.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that it's the 140 characters, that there's that limit. Right. That's, boy, you either got to get it in or you don't. And it's fun to me, and that's where I see the future going with it, is that people are able to get a little bit better grasp on your humor. Had a newbie wannabe country star on this morning, and I love her Twitter feed. I think it's the best thing in Nashville. Her name is Jada Dreyer, and she's hilarious. And she was saying, you know, my mom, I send those tweets to my mom to say, help me filter this, because should I send this out or not? I said, no, you can't have your mom do that. Send it to me. Let me filter, because mom's way too close to the situation. You need somebody a little farther back, because she's so smart and clever. That's what I like. You know, and just something as silly. Literally, I looked at one of her tweets the other day, and her whole tweet was, if you play with my hair, I marry you. How awesome is that?
Hashtag random.
It was just, you know, and one another thing with hers was like, eating leftover sushi. Worst idea ever. and to me, that's what you love about Twitter. Now, do I learn stuff? Sure, and I love it when somebody can teach me things on Twitter. It's amazing what you can learn. But I guess that would fall under content. I'm really big on the content, and I love that. I think it's something that you really can run with.
Well, it's great now that you can actually pull that content into your show.
I do it all the time.
You have immediate. It now has created a two-way channel on a show that used to be one way. Like you said before, you're looking at advertising and other ways to measure it. Now you're looking at what are people actually saying, and how am I going to use that to drive the show, so that they're involved. They're a part of what it is that you're actually doing.
They tweet
Maybe
while I'm
even
in the middle of a
naming
bit.
them in the middle of your show. I think I've heard you do that before.
I've had people get me up in the middle of a bit, and I'll just be like, oh, well, somebody said this, somebody said that. And it's amazing because it's just right then, real time. Here we go, let's play. And that's fun with me. Now, the people who have my number just text me. And I'm like, oh, here's what Fox said. So, but it's neat when you have those people who have that connection with you, but don't have that connection with you. But it's still kind of Twitter's just so darn, it seems like it's just so much personal.
What stands out to you though, when with so many? I mean, you get 100 plus tweets or shares, likes, comments for sure. Who stands out on all of that? I mean, you throw out a question, I think, once a day, and you use that
usually.
question on your social, on your radio show. What one or two people stand out as being everything that we're talking about here? Authentic, funny. What resonates with you? Because I think that's what everybody's really trying to figure out, is how do they stand out from the crowd?
Wow. People, again, and we'll relate this back to what I said earlier when I said I know my own voice. And I don't mean the timbre of my voice. I mean by what I say. And when people say something, especially when it's funny, and you can just tell it's born of experience, that it came from their mind. They didn't steal it from anybody else. It just came from their mind. And this is the way I thought about it, or this is, you know, and that's what stands out to me. Now, you know, depending on the question, you know, because I just try to do different questions that anybody can say. You know, what's the best sandwich ever? Everybody has a comment. You know, what's the best sandwich ever? Or I'll do something, a lot of my stuff relates to food. I know it's really hard for you guys to believe that.
I'm with you.
But one of the things I'll ask once a year is, what's the most unusual thing that you eat? You eat, you know, because everybody eats something that most people would go. And it's so interesting. I love questions that allows you to be you. You know, you get to answer it based on your thought process. And those are the things that stand out to me. You know, because when you allow people, like I said, give me something interesting about you. You allow people to sit back and go, how about this? And sometimes it will literally blow you away, because it's their life and they don't think of it as mind-blowing. But the rest of us go, oh my God. And so when you allow people that moment to really go, and if they choose to really share with you, that's awesome. That's what really stands out. Whether it's humor, whether it's something else, you know, it's being, that's what your good friends do. You know, when you and I are hanging out or talking and sitting in the backyard and watching kids scream or whatever, the things that make us laugh the hardest are when we share something. When they shared something personal, that's what we laugh at the hardest. You know, you do that with all your friends. That moment that you said, this is really what happened and this is the way I looked at it and this is the way I reacted to it. There's nothing beats that, because it's your experience, and everybody who knows you knows how true it is, especially you. Whether you're setting your pants on fire or whatever. The stories are legion, kids.
We're going to edit that out.
But I think that's what stands out. If that is an answer to the question that makes sense, being able to hear somebody's voice, you know, I think that's what politicians strive for. I think that's what people who do showrunners, you know, the showrunners, if they can, a movie works if you really can believe that character would say that. When they don't, when it, you know, something's off kilter, that's when we have a hard time bonding. And I think maybe that's why people can bond with radios, because it is one of the few mediums that allows you, if you choose, to give as much of yourself as you want. Soap opera stars aren't going to be able to do that. Your news readers aren't going to be able to do that. Oprah does to some extent. Look, billions. But that's, I think, how Oprah got big. It's Oprah took the radio idea, because some of the names from yesteryear, Art Linkletter, Ed Sullivan, even Johnny Carson, you didn't learn a lot about them. They didn't go on and share. And Oprah took the radio idea of going, this is what's going on with me. I'm from Mississippi. I was abused. I've gone through this. I struggle with my weight.
Let's talk about that for a second. Transparency.
My weight? Oh. First to say, you son of a...
Let's talk about your weight loss program. Let's talk about transparency. How do you manage your personal life and your business life? Do you see them as separate together? And what part of you filters certain things, or do you just let it all out there?
Oh, no. I filter all the time, as we all do in each of our lives. My thing is I strive to never make my wife look bad, because it's not fair, because I have a microphone and she doesn't. And it's also not very loving. So usually when I talk about my wife, most of the time it's about time she popped me, or she caught me saying something stupid. And if I do kid her, it's stuff that she laughed about too. But I would never talk about something very personal with her. I would never talk about, when we were going through the whole issue of my son, I was really, with my youngest Jackson, I was really, really cognizant of how she would feel about things. You know, because this was her son too, and it was very personal, and I wasn't there who, you know, I stood by, but I didn't create the life and had to go through the things that she went through. So I'm always very cognizant of that, and I would never betray a trust of you know, there's stuff you and I have talked about that I would never betray a trust, because that's what friends do. But as far as being able to go, you know, my son said this yesterday or whatever, and that'll change too as I get older and he gets older. I'm sure he'll sit back and go, hey Dad, would you shut your pie hole? Okay. But right now, because it's so generic, you can have fun, because this is stuff that people have been through. And whether it's, and the relatable to me is, there's a lot of 22-year-olds out there with a 2.5-year-old and a 1-year-old. So they relate to the 2.5-year-old and 1-year-old. A lot of 60-year-olds who remember the 2.5 and the 1-year-old. There's a few of us idiots who are 50 with a 2.5 and a 1-year-old. And it's a completely different mindset, but we all have that universal truth that we go with. And so you can share those things. You can relate to those things. But yeah, there's those, the personal things, edit all the time. I would always edit all the time. I would never go on and, I'd never do the Howard Stern thing and let's discuss penis size. I would never do that, because that's not what I do, and that's not a slam on Howard Stern. I think he's brilliant. but that's just not what I do. It's not what I feel comfortable with. Made a decision a long time ago that when I do my show, you can go anywhere to get depressed. You can go anywhere to get the news. You can go anywhere to get serious. If you're looking to get that little release from reality and know that whatever we're talking about, I'm going to try to find a little fun in it, that's where I'm going. So if you want to come along for that ride, and whether you want to stay for all 4 hours or just for 10 minutes, well, no, yeah, in that 10 minutes, I want to go somewhere fun. And I'm not going to get, because it's easy to take the Newtown tragedy or whatever and just us all get bogged in there. And there's places for that. And even though I tried to acknowledge it, I tried not to get bogged down into it, because it was just like coming on after 9/11. You had to make that decision. Are we going to sit here and for the next year, or we're going to just start getting back? Because to me, the best revenge is going, yeah, screw you, and moving on and laughing again. And so that's where I try to go with it. That's who I am. That's my transparency, that I'm going to share stuff with you. We don't all know about Oprah. She never tells us what Stedman looks like in a thong. And I do want to know. But she shares enough that lets you bond with her. I've rarely ever seen her. I don't know how much you've seen her, but I know her. I know her. How brilliant is that?
Right.
So it's a great lesson for all of us. I think we should name Oprah Queen and just get over this damn stuff. How awesome would she be? She'd probably be great.
So you have you have all these people that, just going back again to everybody that you've talked with over the course of your career, and all these people that have made it in the industry. You've followed them since they were not a name. They weren't. I mean, you've met them backstage at probably their first concerts.
I've met them in the
you've seen
parking
them
lots.
all the way through to now.
I met the Dixie Chicks coming out of a Taco Bell. True story.
I remember listening to you. One of my favorite bits was a group, and you'll probably remember which group, because you interviewed them on their first live interview, and then they went out to their car. And
Little Big Town. It's a Little Big Town.
You had me in tears.
Little Big Town was the first time they had ever heard their song. I was born in the, I can't remember the name of the song.
Boondocks?
Boondocks. Thank you. Too many years, too many songs, not enough drugs. And I remember talking to them, and they've been doing it that was 14 years ago. And they literally went out to their car to hear their song played on the radio for the first time ever. And that was so cool. And this past year has been a huge year for them. It's finally exploded.
And how many years ago was that?
14 years ago.
Right.
And
so it takes a while.
Yeah, but there's a majority of people out there who think, wow, where'd this group come from?
Well, that's the whole thing. Overnight successes. Do they exist?
Today, yes. Today, yes. They never existed up until American Idol and YouTube. Even though Justin Bieber has been playing songs forever, in the scheme of radio, in the scheme of music, he's an overnight success. And literally, kids found him on YouTube. That's shocking. This kid, he's melting down now and probably won't see 25, but still, he was found from nowhere. And the Kelly Clarksons, the Carrie Underwood, even though Kelly Clarkson had a record deal, and Carrie Underwood would have been discovered. She's just one of those phenomenal talents. You couldn't have held her back. But the growth process for her, where it used to take 1, 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, you think about names like Tim McGraw and Garth Brooks, they put out literally 4, 5, 6, 7 albums before anybody heard of them. Now, you don't even get an album. You get 1 or 2 cuts released on iTunes, and if it doesn't click, you're done. So you have to be an overnight success now in a lot of cases.
Interesting.
And Carrie Underwood was that. She didn't have that incubation period. She went from this amazing talent to boom, right here.
Do you think that's better or worse? I mean, how, on the person, on her,
On her?
on the next wave of people that would probably look at overnight success going even faster. I know we can't imagine it right now, but if that's the case and it's speeding up, it's going to speed up even more. And what will that do to the person? How fast will they? I mean, you've seen people crash hard.
Justin Bieber, he's crashing right now.
Right.
It first and foremost depends on the person, but it is a different gauntlet. And I had this conversation years ago with another country star saying, these guys haven't played in the clubs. They haven't learned how to do this. And my argument to him is, yeah, well, you weren't 19 years old playing in front of 12 million people either. You don't think that's a different kind of pressure? Do you think that's something you can't even wrap your mind around? That you're 35 years old and you haven't played in front of 12 million people? I mean, that's a totally different kind of pressure. And not only are you playing in front of 12 million people, you're having 3 people eviscerate you on the air if your performance wasn't absolutely perfect, depending on what they perceived as perfect. It's one thing to go in the club and have a bunch of drunks not listen to you while you sing. You get to make every wrong note and hit all you want. And you get to learn how to do it. They didn't. So it's a different world, but both of them have their own pressures. And for the persons who go out there and do it, the best thing now is even the overnight success stories don't expect to have long careers. That they truly, even subconsciously, have bought into Andy Warhol's 15 minutes of fame. And they're just going to grab it and kind of hold on to it and make what they can out of it and then move on. The majority of them have the good head on their shoulders that go to see what I can do. This is I've got my platform, and we'll see. And if it works, fine. And if it doesn't work, the marketplace will tell you. So,
tell me about something that inspired you. Maybe it was a person in your career that actually inspired your career, and something unexpected that happened that you think you look back on and you say, "Wow, that really made a difference in my life."
Had a chance. A guy invited me to go play golf down at his club in L.A. He was CEO of one of the companies up here. And he invited me to go down and play golf because he said, he goes, you ever heard of Rick Dees? And in my business, he's the Bill Gates of, he's just a legendary name. I'm like, hey, so come on down. We'll play golf with Rick. And so we went down to L.A. and I ran over Joe Pesci in the locker room. True story. And I sat in the cart with him. And I get a master class in radio for 4 hours. He sits back and tells me, listen, do this. Don't do this. Try this. Don't try this. Don't ever do this. Always do this. It was fascinating. And it's the only contact I've had with him, but it was so awesome for those 4 hours. He was totally, this is what I'm thinking. This is what's worked for me. This is something you might want to try. This is stuff that never works. And it really was, when you're in the midst of it, you were going, wow, something's happening here. Rarely do we have moments where we know when something's happening. I knew. I was right there in the moment and just soaking everything he set up. So, yeah, playing golf with Rick Dees, that's pretty awesome.
And having a mentor in your life is certainly something I think that everybody's looking for, and even get a day like that with somebody like that is pretty awesome. Tell me about now somebody in the industry that made a difference, shocked you almost with, you've met, again, so many different superstars. Who treated you in a different way than you expected, or perhaps your audience?
Garth Brooks is awesome. And Garth Brooks understands the role of radio, and he also understands the role of being that guy. Years ago, he's the HP Pavilion. And usually, they don't do backstage this way anymore, but the way you used to do it, you used to go back into a big room, and you would wait, and then all of a sudden the entourage would come in, and the star would come in, he would stand on the side of the wall, and you'd go and you'd and take a picture with him. You really wouldn't have talked to him. Take a picture and you're on your way. So, we had this group of people that were taken backstage. Well, we go in the backstage, we open the door, they're in a room by himself, Garth Brooks, by himself, waiting on us. He had found out from his people who was bringing us backstage. He didn't know me from Adam's House Cat. He runs up to me and goes, Gary, how have you been? How's the golf game? What's going on? Gosh, it's good to see you again. He's now made my audience feel like he and I are buds. So I'm ready to run through any wall in the world for him. And then he sits back and he has everybody sit down. He goes, can I get you something to drink? You want a Coke? You want a beer? You want a soda? What do you want? People are being now served by Garth Brooks. So this guy pulls out this program and he goes, can I get you to sign my program? Garth Brooks looks and says, did you buy that here? He goes, yeah. He goes, I don't sign anything that you buy. He pulls out his billfold, hands the man a 20, grabs the thing, signs it, gives it back to him, and does that for everyone in the room. Now you understand why to this day Garth Brooks doesn't have a hit on the radio, but I can get on the air any morning, any day, and sell out HP Pavilion by that night. Guaranteed. No doubt in my mind.
Wow. Class act. Mm-hmm. That makes me, want to thank you for your time here and for doing this interview. But I also want to tell you that you're a class act in everything that you do. And I mean, obviously, with everything that you've discovered in your 37 years, you've learned to harness, everything that we've talked about in authenticity and transparency and all these important issues. And at the end of the day, you're a class act, and I really appreciate you and your
For
your
you,
friendship.
dude,
So.
anything. And this interview actually has felt like it's been 37 years. Don't you agree?
Cheers.